Woo, we are finished with our checker pattern. And this is actually an underlayer for an entire finish that's gonna go on the side. We want this to be like something that was revealed from underneath something else. So we're gonna cover some of it up here in both corners. So the way I'm gonna do that, I want to add not only paint, but I want to add texture to it as well. And we'll be adding some gold leaf as well. So hang in there with me. We are gonna start with our base coat, which is Sawmill Gravy, which is this color that you see right here. And we're gonna be adding Sea Spray. Sea Spray is a paint additive that will add texture and depth and dimension to your piece. It's really, really good to add an old world look. You can also use it to, you can use it for raised stencil effect as well. But right now we're just gonna be adding it to our paint. Now, sea Spray it looks like cornstarch. It's really powdery. It's a thin, powdery additive that you just add to your paint. So what I'm gonna do is my Sawmill Gravy, which is my base coat. You can add Sea Spray to any color of paint that you want, any color. So we are gonna add a little bit of Sawmill Gravy into just an extra jar that I have here. I don't need much because I'm just gonna go in. I'm not painting the whole side. I'm just kind of filling in around the frame here of this checkered area. So we just got a little bit of our Sawmill Gravy poured into the bowl. And then the recipe or the bag actually says 2 full scoops to 8 ounces. Well, this is clearly not 8 ounces. I've probably got maybe 2 ounces here. So I'm gonna start with about a half a scoop, just a half a scoop. And you can use, you really just need to play around with this. So I'm putting half a scoop in, just got a stir stick here, and I'm just gonna stir this in. Now the thing about Sea Spray is it starts out loose and thin, and then you need to let it sit for a few minutes before you really make your decision if you're gonna add more or not, because it thickens up as it sits and as air gets to it. But you want it to be sort of thick, like a brownie batter consistency, which I'm gonna say that is spot on what that is. I'm gonna call that for sure a brownie batter consistency. But it's really up to you. You can make it a lot thicker if you want, but that's what I'm gonna go for here. So I don't even need to let this set up actually. So I'm just gonna scrape that off. Now I have a chip brush here, and I also have an artist brush, or I did, right here. I have an artist brush here, with just a 1-inch flat artist brush. Now I could be using just my chip brush, my goodness, to fill in this whole area here, right here on the top. But because I wanna try to keep the Sea Spray off of this pink trim right here, I'm gonna use my small brush at first. I'm just gonna take my Sea Spray. If it starts to be, like what I've scooped off onto the side already is really thick. So if it feels too thick, you can add more paint to it and just thin it back out. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm just gonna kind of work this into the corner. I'm not really painting with it. I do normally like a stipple technique, and I'm just gonna do the stipple technique all around the edges here. I'm just gonna use my finger to kind of wipe off what gets on that trim. Not gonna worry about it too much. There we go. And I really want to be adding like some peaks and valleys to this. Do you see how thick this is on my brush? So I'm gonna take it all the way across, even where I've left it empty. And I'm just gonna take my larger brush, get it in here. It's kind of messy. And just start pouncing it on like this. Just gonna kind of fill in this area. And I want it to have a very much, do you see how the texture is inside the bowl? Can you see that? You see that? That's kind of what I want here. I want it thicker around the corners. I want it to look as if, you know, dust and plaster has broken away and fallen away and gotten here in the edges. So I'm gonna take this all the way across, and I'm gonna do the same thing up here. I'm gonna get up here in my corners. If it starts to thicken up on you, you can just add a little bit more paint. You can add a little bit of water if you want to thin it out. but I'm liking it thick. It actually is already starting to set up a little bit, so that kind of speeds up the process, and I'm good with that. But if you're trying to do an overall piece, like you want to add sea spray and paint an entire piece, just add more paint to it. You have control over how thick you want it to be. Okay, so I'm going to use my smaller brush and get up here, kind of take it all the way across and all the way down, just like so. And then you can kind of just decide, you know, how much do you really want that? Should we go ahead and cover up a little bit more here? Let's take it out a little bit more with my brush there. And then I'll use my larger brush and go back. And you can keep adding to it as it dries. You can just go back over and stipple that area a little bit more, just like that. Up here too. And remember, this is an underlayer. You could leave it like this if you want, and it's just gonna give an overall plaster look, but I'm actually gonna be covering this with leaf. All right, I think that's good. We're gonna leave it like that, and I will come back to you guys once this is set up and dry, and we will continue to build our layers. Okay, I'm gonna bring you in real close because I actually went in and added, I let it set up in my bowl, you can see here. And I used my finger, and I went in and added it with my finger. So I'm gonna bring you in close so that you can kind of see how thick it is up close. Can you see that? Can you see the thickness? So let me show you right here. I just got a big clump of it like this, on my finger, just like so. And I just kind of started to spread it out like this. It's kind of like clay. It feels sort of like clay, but I like the thickness and I like the big stippling action that I'm getting there with my finger. See that? So I'm gonna leave that and I'll let it dry and I will get back with you. While the sea spray is drying, I am gonna go ahead and start cutting my stencils. So this is one of the bells and whistles stencils. It's the Harlequin pattern from Dixie Belle. I've already used it multiple times and I am about to cut it up, which seems like a waste, but I've already used it so many times. And sometimes you just need to cut it to get a perfect fit, and so that's what I'm gonna do. I've already trimmed it actually across 3 of the sides. Normally the stencils have, do you see this across the sides? Normally they have this space right here, all the way around them. I needed this to fit perfectly already, and so you can see that I've trimmed it right to the edge of the diamond pattern, and you can see this side is missing that space. So I've trimmed this side as well, and I've trimmed the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and, well, I'm not so worried about trimming this side off as I am needing to measure where I need this to be on the drawer front. So let me turn you here and show you where I am here. Ooh, it's thundering outside. I'm gonna start with this top drawer, and this is a good fit all the way into the corner. And I'm gonna go ahead and just press down where I want this fit to be. I'm gonna press this with my scissors here and kind of make like a little mark on it so I know where it needs to be. And I'm gonna snip that. I'm gonna snip it with my scissors. And then I know that I need to hit about this height all the way across, and it will fit in perfectly into this drawer front frame so that I don't have this lip that I'm having to worry about. I can fit it flat into there, and I can do my Harlequin stencil across the front. Now I could tape off Harlequin stencil, but we've already taped off checks, so we're gonna get, I could tape off Harlequin pattern, but I've already got my checks on the side, so we're just gonna use a stencil on the front. It'll make it a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. And I'm gonna cut this straight across, and I'll show you how well it fits in just a second. Here you go, this is my cut piece. It fits perfectly into my drawer. I will start it on one side. Fits in perfectly. I will tape it in place. I'll do my stencil, and then it's not quite long enough, so I will lift, match up my diamond, and move it to the side and tape and keep going. Okay, I actually decided I'm not going to use tape. I've just popped it in place. It's just staying on its own. So I'm using a 1-inch craft brush to stencil. I'm just dipping lightly into my Sawmill Gravy, just barely like this. And then I rub just a little bit off on my cloth. And then I go ahead and I come over here. And the thing with stenciling is you want to come straight at the stencil, not from an angle. So I'm just going to start pouncing straight at that stencil. You don't want to turn your brush sideways at all because you don't want your bristles to go underneath the edge of the stencil. So I'm just coming straight at it at a 90-degree angle and just filling in each triangle at a time, just like so. You're getting like sound effects in the background. Can you hear the storm? It's storming outside. Storming. As a matter of fact, if it rains too hard, I get a little bit of a leak in here, so I had to move while I was working on this. If you're working on a stencil that you just can't hold in place yourself, like this one kind of popped out there a little bit, it's okay. Just use some painter's tape and tape your stencil in place. I don't use stencil adhesive. There's also some spray adhesive that you can put on the back of stencils to hold your stencil in place. I never use that. To me, it's really sticky. It adds another step to your stencils, especially if you want to reuse your stencils in the future. It makes them sticky and tacky on the back, and I don't really like that. So I usually just hold it in place. I'm just going to keep this up. So there we go. I've done one part of my stencil so far. You can see that it is less than perfect, and I'm totally okay with that. Just like the rest of the piece, I'm going for kind of an organic feel. So the trick with stencils to get a decent edge like this without taping off or, you know, sticking your stencil to your piece is to use as little as paint as possible on your brush. Keep your brush at a 90-degree angle from the stencil, not at an angle, but flat. And then also when you're laying your paint down, your first few strokes, let them be right in the middle of your shape and then work your way out to the edge. You want as little paint as possible hitting the edge. So now you would just want to do a match up. I'm just going to move this over until I get, well, actually I want that at the end. So I'm going to move this over until I get a good match here. I'm going to hold that in place or see if I can get it to stick itself there in place. And go ahead and I'll move my jar over because I'm got one hand here. I'm holding it in place. Again, I've dipped my brush, holding it in place, and I'll just continue on with the triangles just like this. And the first drawer is done. It's done. So we'll now move on to the next one. Now this one, the size is going to work perfectly for the second drawer as well, but this bottom drawer is a little bit deeper. So I can either use this stencil and then match it and move it down, or I can just use the rest of my stencil that I had already cut from and cut a new stencil to fit this drawer perfectly. I'm not sure which one I'll do yet. Two drawers are done and I'm ready to do the bottom drawer. I could use the larger piece of my stencil and cut it down to fit this larger drawer on the bottom, but I think I'll save that larger piece of stencil for another project down the road, and I will continue to use this piece. I can just move it as I need it. So I will do just like I did with the others. I'll start with this piece up at the top. I'll hold it in place. I'll stencil out my diamonds, not triangles. I keep calling it triangles. I'll stencil out my diamonds, shift it down, shift it over, and finish up my Harlequin. And we're done. We're done with our Harlequin. So now just to decide what layer I'm going to do next. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this, so give me a minute. So as shocked as I am, I think I've decided that I am going to use the Alice transfer on this nightstand. So I've used the Alice transfer so much, but I started going through my products and I love it for this piece with the checkerboard pattern that we've got going on, the old world, the color scheme. It's just I just have this vision, and we're going to be mixing, I mean, we've now used stencils. We're now going to be using transfers. This is Alice in her chair, which I've only used on an actual upholstery chair. I don't know if you've seen that video or not, but there's a whole video on how, a video and a blog on how to create your Alice upholstered chair, transfers on upholstery. And there's a kit available for that as well, a Dixie Belle kit that was inspired by my project. But I've also used these on tea set trays. This is about the size of the inside of a tea set tray. And I've used them on my tea sets, and I don't know if you've seen those either, but we have those available, tutorials for those available for you as well. So this is my first time to actually use it on a large wood piece of furniture, and I'm really excited about it. I will be layering this transfer with some decoupage, some trimmed out decoupage papers on top of it. That's my plan. So I am gonna set Alice about right here, a little higher. You would think I'd put her down low like this, but I'm gonna raise her up just a bit so we have a little bit of room for something down underneath her. Yeah, I think maybe just a little bit lower, about like that. That's about what I'm gonna do right there. So the way you do this, when you've got a transfer and you've obviously got drawers, I am going to let her go over the lip. You see this lip right here? I'm gonna actually, instead of cutting the transfer underneath here, I'm going to cut the transfer so she actually goes over the lip, continues on this next lip and up. I don't want to give a big, huge pink row in between the bottom of her chair and the rest of her body. So I have my scissors here available. I'm gonna put it where I want it, which I believe is about right here. And I am just going to press really tight in between. You could use an X-Acto knife to do this as well. Just gonna make a snip on one side. I'm gonna come over here and snip on the other side. And I could just cut right across like that. It's a lot easier with an X-Acto knife. You just press it in and press across. But I've made my 2 snips. I'm going to just lay these down in front of me and follow my snips on each side straight across. All right, so here is the bottom part of my Alice transfer. The transfers come with a white backing on them. See this? You just peel this off, just like so. You don't want to put your fingers on the actual design. Make sure that you've left enough clear backing around the sides that you can hold on to it, because if you put your finger on that design, you're going to take some of that design off. So I'm going to lay this right up here where I want it. And it's got some stickiness to it. And I'm gonna go ahead and stick this to the drawer. You don't wanna let go, you wanna kind of hold it in place. I'm always missing my stuff. Where is my stick? Here it is. All right, so this is your transfer stick right here. I'm gonna start moving this transfer. I'm gonna put my foot down here to hold my transfer in place, my piece in place. I'm gonna start rubbing this transfer in place, and it will start to adhere. Just rub with the stick all over. There you go. See, now it's adhered enough that I can let go. And you'll start to hear it release. I'd rather do the larger part on the bottom and let that release first, but it's kind of wanting to do this. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and try to release this upper part. I'm just using my fingers on that. The thing about the Dixie Belle releases is they bend really, really well without tearing. So I am just rubbing with my fingernails kind of across this rounded lip area, and I can see that it's already releasing from that backing. There we go. And you see that? See how this backing has pulled forward? Can you see that? Let me show you up close. You see how the backing has pulled off? And the transfer is stuck to the drawer itself, and that's what we want. Now I can go ahead and just work on releasing the rest of this transfer. And moving down with this. So you just sort of push with the stick at the same time that you're pulling the transfer sheet down. And these larger transfers are really, really easy to release. They sort of release all in one sheet. The more delicate transfers, like the lace transfer, that one you have to be a little bit more tedious with, a little more careful. This one right here, this is a really good beginner transfer, the large sheet. You would think it wouldn't be, but especially if you do something like like if you'd done just this on the side of the nightstand, where you could lay the entire picture down in one big bulk piece without having to cut it, you'd feel like a rock star, because that would come off really easily. So you see that? Look how cool that is. You just want to take your finger, make sure you've gotten up underneath there and that it's stuck really well. And we'll move on and we will burnish our transfer and tell you more about that here in just a little bit. Looks good. Okay, I've done the same exact thing this time. I have just rubbed my fingers over the lip as much as I could until I got that transfer to release. Now I'm gonna start using my stick. I'm gonna press it down into that groove above that lip as hard as I can and get it to start releasing there so that I can move up the flat image. There we go. Anywhere that I can't get it to release, I just kind of hit it with my fingernail, and then you start to get a release. Now I'm going to work my way up here. And you can see that it has released here onto the piece. You see this? And I'll do the same thing all the way up to that next lip. So don't be afraid to work in these kind of challenging spaces. These Dixie Belle transfers are so hardy. And they really, really do work so well. A lot of the transfers in the past, when people first started coming out with transfers, they would crack and tear. And these just don't. They just don't. They really do mend and mold and go where you want them. So now I've made it all the way up to this top lip. I'm just gonna take, now you can also, see how I've made it this far, you can take this much of the transfer off. If you want to go below where you've been, that helps you any at all, so you don't have that plastic to deal with. Now I'm just going to take this over this edge. You also can pull this up a little bit and kind of work it over the edge as you fold over, just like this. Now this is a little bit more of an advanced technique, but I've pressed on the upper end and I'm just kind of pulling the transfer that way and then just laying it down. So that was a little bit more of an advanced technique, but definitely something you can do, right? Same thing, get this laid down and we'll move up. How cute is she? She looks so good. She looks really, really good. Kind of ran my fingernail up along that ridge, this top ridge, everywhere the ridge of the lip is. I just ran my fingernail there and kind of separated it a little bit just to get it to lay down completely. You want to make sure that you don't have any air left beneath the surface at all. So now we are going to look at using the Bells and Whistles decoupage paper called Spring Flowers. I think I'm gonna cut these out and just lay these around the bottom, or I may even use a couple of sheets side by side just to go across the bottom. The good thing about this Spring Flowers paper is, it's, first of all, it's really, really thin, but any of the decoupage papers that are white in the background, when they dry, they're actually see-through. So because I have this Harlequin pattern underneath here, if I use a sheet of decoupage paper like this, it's very, very, very thin, this rice paper. It's got, you can see the threads, see that underneath there? So if I am to lay this, let's say I just do it up to this top lip, you'll be able to see the decoupage beneath it. And as I run it lower underneath Alice's chair or around the legs of her chair, so it looks as if she's sitting in a garden, you'll be able to see the Harlequin pattern underneath it. So I think that's what I'll do. It's helpful sometimes with rice paper to go ahead and just tear the top edge so you don't have this set in square. You can just kind of tear along where you want it. But because of the way this bottom drawer is lined out, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it to where it just stops at that lip up there. So I actually have a straight edge. I don't need to do that natural torn edge. So I've cut my sheet the way I want it, but I do have all of this excess white at the top that I don't want to cover Alice. So what I'm going to do is I laid it where I wanted it, and I just ran my fingernail. You can use, you know, a pair of scissors if you want, just to kind of outline where you want to make your tear. I'm not going to cut it with scissors. I'm actually going to use the tearing method. That way it's a little bit more natural look. And I've just sort of made an indentation, and I'm just gonna start tearing just like this. And it just, you can see the rice paper fibers coming out, and that is going to give it a much softer edge for you to lay down. You won't have that super hard and sharp cut edge. The other side, since it is going to go all the way up, the flowers will go up higher on that side. I probably won't need to cut or tear. We'll see. All right, that's my torn paper. All right, I'm gonna use clear coat and satin. This is Dixie Belle's clear coat. I just put it in a squeeze bottle because I have an issue with keeping my lids clean and I can't get them on and off. So I'm just gonna squeeze this into a small container, and I've got a small artist brush right here. I'm gonna put a little bit of the clear coat and satin on the piece itself. I know that I'm gonna use it down here on the bottom, and kind of went a little overboard on that, but that's okay. And then I'm also going to put it onto the back of this paper, just like this. You don't have to do this part, but it doesn't really matter how you do it. You can put it here, that way that corner gets on there nice and good. Okay. Start brushing it up. It'll soak through that paper, and the wrinkles will just start to smooth out. There we go. And the edge of this white paper kind of gives like a ghost-like appearance. And you can see right through it. You see that? You can see the Harlequin right through it. Yeah, we have the appearance of the flowers there as well. And I just use my brush to press out any bubbles that I see. Just kind of run it over the paper like so. You can use your finger to run it across if you want. And then you just let it dry. Make sure you got it good and wet all the way through. And once you can tell that it's adhered, just go ahead and step away from it, leave it alone. They're pretty hardy papers, but you don't want to tear them. And then I'll just keep going across the side. That was just my clear coat. I've pre-torn my piece. I've trimmed it to fit perfectly in this corner. Again, I've got my clear coat. Start running it across. I've got a lot of it here, but that's okay. You want it to soak through your paper. If you see some of these parts that look a little bit more white than other areas, that's actually not bubbles or folds. It's actually the fibers that make up the rice paper. So it definitely has a really organic, overall, natural feel to it. And there is Alice's garden. Ah, I love it. So this side over here, I felt like needed one more little piece. And so I just tore an extra piece right off of the edge of a piece of paper that I hadn't used. And I am just going to sort of inject this little piece over here, just like on transfers. You can sort of build, and that's what I'm gonna do right here, is just inject that little piece there with my clear coat and satin. Get it wet and add one more little wildflower right over here to the side. Here. Kind of feel like she needs another one right here, so I'll probably look for another flower that I can tear out and put right there. I couldn't stand it. One more flower right here. Kind of putting that one in at an angle a little bit. The rice papers layer beautifully. They are so thin and they layer really well. There we go. Voila! When you brush on your adhesive, you'll want to let this get tacky first. A spray adhesive, you don't need to really wait. Spray adhesive, you can spray out and use your gold leaf pretty much right then. The brush on adhesive, you need to let it get tacky first. It usually needs to set for about 15 to 20 minutes. You'll see it go on white and creamy, and then it will, once it gets tacky, it's clear. And then that's when you know that you can start to apply your gold leaf. If you don't let it get tacky first, when you apply your gold leaf where it's wet and thick and puddly, it will literally turn your gold leaf into like paste. It'll just make it goopy and gooey. So you need to make sure you let it set up first. Now we're down to my favorite part, my gold leaf. All right, so I've already stuck a sheet up there. All of the areas that I put the adhesive is super tacky. So gold leaf comes in a package like this. These are gold leaf sheets. They're separated by a thin piece of like tissue paper. If you've never worked with gold leaf before, it's quite addicting and so much fun. It's very, very thin. It tears super easily. It's fine if it's torn. You can use scraps, flakes. It's going to be a little bit messy. So you just want to stick a sheet up here, just like this. You can just stick it wherever. It won't stick if there's no adhesive. It'll stick where there is adhesive. So you can see there, I'm just going to rip that off, lay that over in other areas. You just want to cover the area really well with any of your leaf that you've got laying around. And then we're going to use our brush to knock off any leaf that is not over a sticky area. I'm going to do this, and as we work on this upper area, it's probably going to pull off and float down into some of the area that's below, and that's totally fine. So now we've got that area covered. I'm going to use my soft chip. This is a premium chip brush. I'm going to use this soft brush here to just knock away any excess that we've got. As you can see, the gold leaf got right here on the pink. It means I got a little bit of adhesive right there because it won't stick unless you have adhesive. Not a problem. Your chalk paint, you can actually touch up over that, or I can leave the gold there. I'm not too worried about it. And that's that. And then if I want to sort of wear this out a little bit, I can use a sanding sponge over the top of it. But I'm actually going to be dry brushing and doing some shadowing and shading. So that's that. It's covered. Looks good. Looks so good. I'm basically done with this piece. I'm down to just doing a little bit of whitewashing, some dark waxing, and top coating. But before I do any of that, I need to burnish my transfers that I put here on the front. So Alice and the clocks and the teapot, I'm just going to use this finishing pad by Dixie Belle. It's a sponge on one side and it's a sandpaper on the other. I believe it's like a 220 grit. So I'm just going to take this and run it directly over my transfer. And what this does is it makes sure that my transfer has no bubbles underneath it and that it's really secure against the piece of the furniture. Lucy, get back. My dog's trying to get in the video. So that's what I'm doing here. Same thing over the clock and the teapot. And you don't want to be afraid of doing this. You really need to go after it. You want to really get that super thin transfer very deep into the grooves of your paint. You want them to become one so that when you put your top coat on, it doesn't cause any lifting of the transfer. If there's any bubble or air pocket left and you put a top coat on it, if it gets underneath there, it's going to cause your transfer to lift. This is how you keep that from happening. So see, you don't have to be gentle. You can really sand it out. Now I'm going to start waxing my piece. I'm going to use the dark wax first, and then I'll probably do a whitewash over in some areas. But I'm going to use Dixie Belle's Gilding Wax in black. This is a very new jar. I absolutely love it. You will need a few different size brushes when you are working with a piece with a lot of carvings. So I've got my Gilding Wax brush right here that I'll be using on the larger flat surfaces. I've got my French tip brush that I like to use to feather out corners. And I've got a smaller craft brush that I use to get down into the deep crevices. So I'm going to get started with this. I'm going to start with the deep crevices first. Just swirl this around just like this. I've already got a top coat over my entire piece, satin top coat, and now I'm just going to go in here and lay this in to these deep crevices like this. And then I'll follow this with baby wipes. And you can leave it set. You don't have to do it as you go. You can leave it set. Because I've got the top coat on there, so the wax will not be so grabby. I can go ahead and run this across the whole piece. And then I'll follow it with baby wipes or a soft cloth, just like this. You'll just take off the wax that you can get to, and the rest of it will stay down deep in the crevices. Gives your piece a lot of depth. I love it so much. This is, other than gold leafing, this is my favorite part. When you're working on a piece with wax, don't be afraid to cover the entire piece with wax. This is how grungy you want it to look. And then you'll go after it and wipe off your excess. Area that still has wax all over it, and then this is the area that the wax has been cleaned up, so you still get an aged feel. I left quite a bit of wax, but you can see the difference.